I stood there in the snow, my flashlight beam trembling across the cabin's interior. The table was set for dinner. 4 plates, 4 chairs. Steam was still rising from the cups of coffee. But the cabin wasn't supposed to exist. I checked every map, every survey, every satellite image for 20 miles. And then I saw what was sitting in the 5th chair, the one I hadn't noticed before, the one facing the door. My name is David Reeves. In November 2023, I was a backcountry ranger for the Shoshone National Forest in Wyoming. What I found during a routine winter patrol didn't just end my career. It changed what I thought was possible. I'd been a ranger for 8 years by that point. I knew the Washakie Wilderness better than my own hometown. Every trail, every valley, every unmarked game path. I'd done solo winter patrols dozens of times, checking hunting camps, documenting wildlife, making sure no one was stuck out there when the serious weather hit. November in the Shoshones isn't tourist season. Once the first heavy snows come, usually around mid-month, the backcountry empties out. It's just you, the elk, and maybe a few die-hard hunters packing out before the season closes. That's what I loved about it. The silence, the solitude. November 14th started normal enough. Clear morning, temperature around 15 degrees, 6 inches of fresh powder from the night before. My route was a standard 3-day loop through the southern section, 28 miles, 3 planned camps, checking on 4 designated wilderness campsites along the way. I left the trailhead at dawn. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No wind, no birds, just the crunch of my snowshoes and my own breathing. After 8 years, you develop a feel for the forest. You know what normal sounds like. This wasn't normal silence. This was the kind of quiet that happens right before something changes. But I pushed that thought away. I had a job to do. My girlfriend Sarah had wanted me to skip this patrol. She'd been having bad dreams all week, said she kept seeing me lost in the snow calling for help. I'd laughed it off, told her I'd done this road 100 times. Hell, I'd helped draw some of the maps myself during the resurvey in 2019. I remember pulling out my topographical map around noon, checking my position at the first ridge. Everything matched perfectly. GPS showed me exactly where I should be. The terrain features all lined up. But there was this smell in the air. Wood smoke, faint but distinct. That bothered me. There were no registered campers in this section, no hunting permits active, and the smell wasn't fresh campfire smoke. It was older, stale, like smoke that had soaked into wood over years. At 2:47 p.m., about 12 miles in, I found the footprints. They came out of the tree line about 50 yards east of the trail, just appeared in the middle of a clearing, like whoever made them had dropped from the sky. No connecting tracks leading to them. The prints headed north, perpendicular to my route, into terrain I knew was too steep and unstable for hiking. I should have ignored them, stuck to my route. But rangers don't leave mysteries alone. If someone was out here without a permit, potentially lost or injured, it was my job to check. I marked my position, took photos, and followed the tracks into the trees. That's when I stopped being able to explain what was happening. The tracks led up slope through dense lodgepole pine, but within 10 minutes, everything felt wrong. The terrain didn't match my map. I was supposed to be approaching a ridge with exposed granite outcroppings. Instead, the forest just kept going, getting thicker, older. The trees were massive, 6-7 feet in diameter. Old growth that should have been logged out decades ago, according to every Forest Service record. I checked my GPS. It showed me moving north, elevation increasing. But the terrain overlay didn't match what I was seeing. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the satellite images were outdated. Maybe there'd been a data error in the mapping. But I'd been here. I'd literally walked this exact section in summer 2022. The footprints kept going. Whoever made them was moving fast, taking long strides, not bothering to avoid deadfall or dense brush. And the prints themselves were strange, too deep, like whoever made them weighed 300 pounds, but the stride length suggested someone barely 6 feet tall. At 4:18 p.m., with maybe an hour of good light left, I saw it through the trees. A cabin, log construction, maybe 20 by 30 feet. Stone chimney on the north side. Smoke was rising from it. Thin, steady smoke. I stopped walking. My heart was hammering. I pulled out my radio to call it in, but got nothing but static. I tried my satellite phone. Same thing. Just dead air and occasional crackling. I approached slowly, calling out, "Forest Service! Anyone home?" Nothing. The cabin looked old but maintained. No rot in the logs. The chinking between them was fresh. There were curtains in the windows. Actual fabric curtains, not survival blankets or plastic sheeting. The door was solid wood with iron hinges. And there was a name burned into a piece of wood above the door, Crestwood. I'd never heard of any structure called Crestwood in the Shoshone National Forest, and I would have. We cataloged every standing structure, every historical site, every cabin and shelter and hunting camp. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and announced myself again. The interior was warm. The fireplace had fresh coals still glowing. There was a table in the center of the room with 4 chairs. On the table, 4 tin plates, 4 tin cups, utensils. Like someone had just set it for a meal. But there was no food, just the empty place settings. The cabin had 2 bunks on the far wall, both with wool blankets neatly folded. There were lanterns hanging from ceiling hooks. A pantry shelf stocked with canned goods. But the labels were wrong. Brands I didn't recognize, packaging that looked decades old. I picked up a can of peaches. The label said, Hillcrest Orchards 1947. On the wall were photographs in simple wooden frames, black and white images of people. 4 men in work clothes standing in front of this exact cabin. I looked closer at one photo. The men were holding tools, axes, saws, but they were standing in snow that came up to their waists, and behind them, the forest looked darker, denser, wrong. I should have left then. Called for backup, even if the radios weren't working. Hiked back to the trail and gotten out. But I'm a ranger. I'm trained to investigate, to help, to understand. I decided to check the fireplace, see how recently it had been used, and that's when I heard footsteps on the roof. Heavy footsteps, walking from the chimney toward the front of the cabin. Slow, deliberate. Then they stopped, right above the door. I grabbed my bear spray, backing toward the corner, trying to see through the windows. The sun was setting, orange light cutting through the trees. I couldn't see anything on the roof. The footsteps resumed, down the side of the cabin now, except they weren't on the roof anymore. They were on the ground. I could hear them in the snow, circling. I moved to the window, looked out, fresh tracks in the snow. Boot prints, same as the ones I'd followed. They circled the entire cabin, passed right by the window where I was standing. But I never saw anyone make them. The tracks just appeared, like they were being made by something invisible. Then they stopped at the door. I watched the door handle, waiting for it to turn. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely keep the bear spray aimed. The handle didn't move. Instead, I heard a voice, right outside. A man's voice, rough and low. "You're late for dinner." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had closed up. "We've been waiting," the voice continued. "We set your place." That's when I noticed the table again. There were 5 place settings now. 5 plates, 5 cups. I'd counted 4 when I came in. I was absolutely certain. "Come outside," the voice said. "We need to show you something." I grabbed the nearest chair and wedged it under the door handle. My training was screaming at me to stay calm, think rationally, but every instinct I had was pure animal panic. The voice outside laughed, not a friendly laugh, a knowing laugh. "That won't help. Nothing you do in there will help." I scanned the cabin desperately. There had to be another way out. The windows were too small to climb through. The only other feature I hadn't checked was a wooden panel in the floor near the bunks. I yanked it open. A ladder led down into darkness. The smell that came up was overwhelming. Mold, earth, and something else. Something organic and rotten. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it down. The basement wasn't empty. There were 4 bodies down there. 3 men and 1 woman dressed in winter hiking clothes. Modern clothes. North Face jackets, Gore-Tex pants, GPS watches. They were sitting against the wall, their eyes open, staring up at me. They weren't decayed. They looked fresh, like they died hours ago, not days or weeks. But they couldn't have been fresh, because I recognized one of them. Marcus Holbrook, missing hiker from 2019. I'd been part of the search team. We'd found his car at a trailhead 40 miles from here, but never found him. The case went cold after 3 months. The woman next to him, I didn't know her, but her jacket had a name patch, Chen S., and pinned to her collar was a wilderness permit. Dated October 2021. The other 2 men I didn't recognize, but they had permits too. 2018, 2016. They'd all come here, found this cabin. And something had kept them. I stumbled backward from the hatch, my mind reeling. The voice outside spoke again, but now it was inside my head, like it was coming from my own thoughts. You followed the tracks. You always follow the tracks. That's what rangers do. I spun around. The 5th chair at the table had moved. It was pulled out now, positioned facing me, and sitting in it was nothing, but the chair's shadow was wrong. The shadow showed someone sitting there. Someone tall, hunched over, with arms too long for their body. I didn't think. I grabbed a fire poker from beside the fireplace and smashed it through the window. The glass shattered and I dove through, barely feeling the cuts as I hit the snow outside. The forest was nearly dark now. My flashlight was still inside the cabin. I ran blind, using the last of the twilight, crashing through brush, my lungs burning in the cold air. Behind me, I could hear the cabin door open. Footsteps in the snow, multiple sets, walking in perfect synchronization. I ran for what felt like hours. My face was numb. Blood from the window cuts had frozen on my hands. I'd lost my pack, my GPS, everything except my coat and the clothes I was wearing. And then, impossibly, I saw lights ahead. The trailhead parking lot, my truck. I'd somehow covered 12 miles in the dark, in 20 minutes. That shouldn't have been possible. I was found hypothermic in my truck at 9:47 p.m. I'd managed to start the engine and get the heat running before I passed out. The park rangers who found me said I kept repeating 5 plates, 5 plates. When I was stable enough to talk, I told them everything. I led a team back to where I thought the cabin was. We found nothing. No cabin, no footprints, no tracks. Just old-growth forest and steep terrain exactly where my map said it should be. They found the bodies, though, all 4 of them. Scattered across 3 different locations in the wilderness, miles apart from each other, like they died where they'd originally gone missing, even though I'd seen them all together in that basement. The coroner said they'd been dead for years, exactly as long as they'd been missing. Exposure, mostly. One had a broken leg, natural causes as far as anyone could tell. But they couldn't explain why I'd seen them, why I knew where to look. I resigned 3 weeks later, told them I couldn't do it anymore. The Forest Service was understanding. Trauma does strange things to people, they said. Hypothermia causes hallucinations. The mind plays tricks in extreme conditions. But I know what I saw. And I know what I found when I got home and finally looked through the photos on my camera from that day. Most of them were corrupted, digital noise and glitches. But one image was clear, the photograph I'd taken of those boot prints in the snow, right before I followed them. If you zoomed in close enough, you could see something in the background. Through the trees, a cabin, and in the window of that cabin, barely visible, was me looking out. Wearing the same clothes I had on, but my face was wrong, older, like I'd been there for years. I deleted that photo. But sometimes, late at night, I still check satellite imagery of the Shoshone National Forest, scanning grid by grid through the wilderness. Looking for a cabin that isn't on any map, because last week I got an email from a hiker I don't know. Subject line, "Did you find the cabin?" The message body was empty except for coordinates. When I checked them, they pointed to a location 15 miles from where I'd been. I haven't responded. But I keep thinking about those place settings at the table. How there were 4 when I arrived, 5 when I tried to leave. I wonder how many there are now. I don't go hiking anymore. Can't bring myself to. Every trail, every forest, every unmarked path, I wonder if it's there, waiting, setting another place at the table. Because I think I understand now. The cabin doesn't appear on maps because it exists somewhere else, somewhere between where you are and where you're supposed to be. And if you follow the wrong tracks, even once, it remembers you. If you're ever in the wilderness and you smell wood smoke where there shouldn't be any, and you find tracks that don't make sense, don't follow them, just turn around. Because they're not trying to lead you somewhere. They're trying to lead you home.